Today, we will look at the profession of architecture. Architecture, as we understand today, was never a profession in the earlier times. Architect was somebody who could build structures which were stable. And before the 1800s, any talented or skilled person could become an architect by working as an apprentice with some practicing architect. Much earlier, in ancient Greece and Rome, many great buildings were built, but they were built by masons, carpenters, other artisans, etc. The first reference that we find to an architect is the Roman builder Vitruvius. Vitruvius, amongst other things, is famous for the three principles that he talked about. He said that architecture must be strong, it must have some utility value, and it must be beautiful to look at. Much later, during the Renaissance period, and you must have learned this in history, uh, Palladio talked about symmetry and proportion. Even in India, right through the Mahabharata times, there was this master builder architect called Mayasur or Maya. In fact, in India, most of the architectural work was done by sthapatis. And what were sthapatis? They were clans of builder and designers, both. So they designed and built also. So the architectural profession as we understand today is a completely alien idea as far as India is concerned. Now, when did it all start? It started when the Britishers came to India and they wanted to create a sense of awe before the or in the minds of their subjects. So they built huge structures which were very British in style, and for that they employed architects from England. How were they constructed? These buildings were constructed through the military engineers. Much later, there were, non-military engineers or civil engineers in India who were taught the techniques of building the British way. And then sometime in 1854, the Sir J.J. School of Arts started a small course for draftsmen. The idea was that they could interpret the drawings which were sent from England, and they were taught to interpret these drawings and make certain changes or generally supervise what happened on site. So this is really the first beginning of the profession of architecture in India. Now, when we talk of profession, what do we understand by this word profession? So let us look at some of the other words which are also used. We use words like occupation, business, vocation, and profession. And many times people tend to use these words as if they are synonyms, as if they mean the same thing. But that's not correct. So, what is an occupation? Occupation is any regular activity that is undertaken by a person to earn his living, earn money for his living. And there are many kinds of occupation. Now, business is one kind of an occupation where people do trading or they exchange goods against money and they try to make profit. Also, it must be understood that business requires some kind of investment into the business so that they can buy products and sell them. Okay. The other word that is often used is vocation. Now let's understand where does this word vocation come from. Vocation comes from the Latin word vocare, which means to call. Now what do you mean by call? It means there is an inner urge to do something. That is the calling, as it is called. And most of the times, vocations are used to fulfill psychological and spiritual needs of the people. For instance, someone likes to paint. It is his psychological need to paint. And then painting becomes his vocation. So it is not necessary that vocation will lead to some kind of earning. So therefore, vocation is usually used for the term vocation is usually used for some kind of activity which is carried out more for self-satisfaction and selfless concern for the well-being of others. So it's kind of a lofty idea. Okay. While as a profession is an occupation which requires extensive training, study, and obtaining mastery of some specialized discipline. It is usually a intellectual activity rather than an activity which is manual, which uses manual skills, etc. Now, these professions are usually regulated by some professional association. There is some kind of licensing or some kind of certification which is done. And the professional is expected to provide impartial and neutral as well as objective advice and service to their clients against some compensation, not free of cost. Okay. Also, usually professions or professionals enjoy a relatively high status in the public eye. However, not necessarily that all professionals will earn high incomes. Amongst others, like law, medicine, and accounts, architecture also is a profession. Now, let us look at what are the constitutional provisions as far as the profession of architecture is concerned in India. The Indian Constitution, Article 19, talks about protection of rights regarding freedom of many activities, including freedom of speech, including freedom of what occupation a person can engage in. So what it says is that any person living in India can be employed or can undertake any activity or any occupation, trade, or business of his or her choice. But Article 19G, subsection 6, has a very interesting and important provision which we must understand. It says that even though anybody can undertake any kind of occupation, there will be certain laws, there will be certain professions which will be regulated by certain state laws. For instance, if you want to be a doctor, then you must be trained as a doctor. And if you're not trained as a doctor, and if you're allowed to practice, you will actually cause great harm to the public at large. So in order to protect the public at large, certain laws can be made and certain reasonable restrictions can be put on practice of certain professions. Now, how is this done? This is usually done through some kind of an act which is passed by the parliament. Now, in 1972, the Architects Act was passed, and under this act, a statutory body called the Council of Architecture was created. Now, what is the role that is given to the council? That it has to maintain a register of all those architects who it feels is good enough to practice. So obviously, when you do this, the council is also guaranteeing that anybody who is registered with them is good enough to provide architectural services for the people in India. So just like this, there are constitutional provisions which exist in every country. It is not only in India. Now, let us look at how has the profession of architecture evolved in India over the period, over the last few years. To start with, as soon as India got independence, it was required that any new structure built all over the country to actually reflect the aspirations of a free nation. And most of these buildings were designed in the public sector, designed and built by the PWD, the public sector undertakings all over India. Now, the public sector undertakings like the PWD, they were all dominated by civil engineers. There are very few architects. So as a result, what we see is the kind of buildings that got built in that period. They had very little to say about architecture. And then what happened? Uh, Jawaharlal Ji Nehru, who was our prime minister, he invited architect Le Corbusier to design the capital city of Chandigarh. And when Corbusier came to India, he brought in a completely new kind of architecture and architecture ideas related to architecture. And most architects in private practice were greatly influenced by first Corbusier and later on by Lucan, who was invited to design the IIM building at Ahmedabad. Now, we have already seen that architecture as a discipline was quite foreign to the average Indian. And there were so few architects in India that most construction of buildings was designed and built by civil engineers, overseers, and even completely unqualified persons, mistris. And therefore, most people felt that architecture is a very elitist profession and it is only for the chosen few, it's not for everyone. Also, the architects of that period were all trained in the British tradition. In fact, many of them also appeared for the examination to get the ARIBA or Associate Membership of the Royal Institute of British Architects. Okay. And the good thing about architects of those of that period were that they were well versed in all skills required, like designing, drawing, writing specifications, estimation, structural design, design of services, management of contracts. They also did a little bit of town planning, landscape, interiors. In addition to that, many of them were also sculptors, painters. In fact, they were all quite multifaceted. And even though consultants were appointed, the architect was always the unquestioned leader of the team. And even students of architecture were always taught to think that they are the team leaders, that they are the drivers of the construction industry. And while this was happening, most of the buildings in India were still continued to be designed by non-architects, mostly civil engineers. And there was a lack of awareness about what architecture is all about. Now, when this was happening, sometime in the 70s, something that happened which changed the entire profession of architecture drastically. And this was the passing of the Architects Act in 1972. Now, it must be understood that the first Architects Bill was drafted way back in 1947, but it was kept on the back burner for a long, long time. It is only when Pilu Modi, who was a member of the Rajya Sabha, he introduced the Architects Bill as a private member's bill in 1970 in the parliament, that it got discussed. And finally, in 1972, the Architects Act was made. Now, the provisions of the Architect Act, they create a Council of Architecture, and the Council of Architecture is charged with the responsibility of maintaining standards of education, recognizing qualification, and then registration of architects, or keeping a register of architects, and also regulating the practice of architecture. Now, why is this done? Let's quickly understand that when the council enters the name of an architect in the register, it is saying that this fellow is good enough to provide architectural service, which means what are the things that the architect must know has to be first realized. And it has to be ensured that somebody who is registered can actually offer architectural practice in architectural service, and therefore he has the necessary skill sets. Now, how will this be done? This is done by creating minimum standards for architectural education. And then anybody who goes through that process of education will, it is assumed that we'll have the necessary wherewithals to practice. And why is this necessary? Because otherwise what will happen is people who are not qualified will be let loose on the society at large. So let's understand that the Architects Act is not something which protects architects. It is there to protect the public at large. Now, many times people ask this question that why did the government wait so long? Why did the Architects Act, when it was introduced in 1947 itself, not get passed? Why did it take so long? The answer is very interesting. The number of practicing architects in the country was less than 700 till 1972, which meant that if an act was passed, only the 700 plus people may have to provide architectural service for the entire country. And that this would have been an impossible situation. So obviously the government felt that we have to wait till we have sufficient number of architects. But even till 1972, the number did not grow. So architects were getting very restless, and therefore a private members bill had to be introduced to get this bill through, and the act came about. Even today, the situation is not really very good. As of now, there are about 80 to 90,000 practicing architects in India. Okay. And interestingly, almost 55% of these are below the age of 35. Okay. Now, all those architects who were trained in the British tradition are already gone. And what we have is a very different scenario. First of all, there is still this fight between architects and engineers as to whether others can also practice architecture. There have been several court cases. I would not like to go into them all of them right now, but I can say that even now there is a lot of ambiguity and the cases are being fought. But we have to also see the other reality. You see, out of these 80,000 odd architects, only 20 cities are really serviced by most of them. Okay, most of them practice in large cities. And how do the number of architects practicing in India compare with other professionals? You see, the world norm is that the number of doctors, lawyers, accounts professionals, and architects required are more or less the same. Okay, one architect or one doctor per 1,000 population. That is the international norm. Now, if you look at the other professions, you will find that doctors practicing medicine, allopathic medicine alone, are more than 10 lakh in India. We have more than 15 lakh lawyers in India. Okay. And how many architects do we have? 80,000. We have only about a tenth of what other professionals have. And therefore, obviously, architectural services are provided by non-architects everywhere. Okay. Now, this creates a small problem. Architects and their practice is regulated under the Act, where the minimum fees are prescribed under conditions of engagement and scale of charges. Also, there is the code of conduct that the architects have to follow. And when you compete with non-architects for jobs or for projects, there is nothing that fetters the other professionals. Okay, because Architects Act is not applicable to non-architects. So they can do whatever they like, and we have to compete with them. And that creates a lot of problems. Let us also look at what has happened in India. As I told you, that nearly 55 to 60% of the architects in the country are concentrated only in the 20 cities of India. And the rest of the city is serviced, the rest is in our remaining 40%. So imagine that the opportunity which are available outside these 20, the architect advantage of these opportunities. If you then Delhi, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka together, they have another 35,000 architects. So, which means out of the 80,000 architects, about 70,000 are only in Maharashtra, Delhi, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka. Rest of these Indian, states are serviced by only 10,000 architects. So you can understand this lopsided state-wise distribution of architects is creating a lot of problems, because the other parts of the country are being serviced by non-architects, obviously. Okay. Also, let us understand that the major construction work in the country is in the sector of housing. Now, housing is mostly, or most of housing is still done by public sector housing. Public sector housing means they are designed by the PWD, and PWD hardly employs the services of any architects. So most of the housing still gets done by non-architects. The private sector housing earlier was in the hands or was driven by architects, where a group of people would come together, they would employ an architect and ask him to call tenders, appoint contractor, and get construction. Today that doesn't happen. Today what's happening is that there is a new, not really new, pretty old, there is a profession of builders. Not even a profession, there is this person called builder who has stepped in, and they appoint architects. Now many builders think that the role of the architect is only to get statutory permissions, and in fact builders do not want architects to supervise or regulate what happens on the site. And since profit is the main motive, and the user or the ultimate user of these residential units which are built by the builders is not present on the scene at all, so that user's aspirations and his requirements are given secondary importance. Only profit, making more money, is what the most builders have in mind. Obviously there will be builders who would not be like this, but very few. And therefore the architect is relegated to a very, very secondary position. Builders hardly pay them, they don't even give them the secondary respect or importance. Third thing that has happened is that most projects have become very large and very complex. In order to run these projects or construct these projects, you require a team of consultants. And as time has passed, the role of the consultant has become even more and more important. Now, unlike the architects of the earlier generations, which knew everything, they were jacks of all trades. The present day architects many times are not well versed in most of the activities of the consultants. And as a result, they are not very effective leaders of the construction team. What has happened is that over a period now, a new kind of person called the project management consultant who has arrived on the scene. And this PMC, he has taken the role that the architect earlier had, and that of the team leader. This has put the architectural practice in a very different situation altogether, because you are no more the team leader. Thing that has happened is that many building components are now being manufactured in the factory. Earlier, an architect had to take many design decisions on site because most of it was made on site or constructed on site. Now, a whole lot of components are available off the counter in the open market. And the architects, rather than designing those components, they have to simply order them off the counter. So they have become more selectors of construction components rather than designers. Okay. Also, due to globalization, many new products are now available on the market. Now, what this has done is that architect has to only make a choice now rather than design. Okay. And that has further reduced the role of the architect. Now, what happens is that in the system of our education, all architects or the would-be architects are told that they have to be unique. Everything that they do has to be different than what every other person in the class is doing. And what that does is that it builds a sort of an attitude in students of architecture that they are very special, they are different from others, and there is a false sense of pride. Now, what happens when they get into the practice is that they have to work as a team member, as part of a team. And architects find it very difficult because of their grounding in the architecture colleges for 5 years to share work with others or share work responsibility with others. It is very difficult for them to accept someone else's point of view. And this is why architects are at a disadvantage while working as team members. Now, another thing that has happened is environment has become a very, very important aspect of our life. And everything that we do now is evaluated in terms of energy efficiency or sustainability. And unfortunately, architects have not been made for this. Even if they do some courses like climatology and few courses on environment, they are still not taught enough specialized technological sciences or inputs are not given to them to really deal with this. Okay. And lastly, but not the least, the viability of small architectural practices is in greater doubt now, because now you will find that large companies can provide, or large firms which employ number of people with varied skill sets are going to rule the roost. Maybe the small architectural firm would maybe survive in very small towns. Okay. Then what do we do now? Okay. If this is the situation, what has to be done? And obviously, what needs to be done is that the Architects Act needs to be amended. Now, what kind of amendments, though I would not go in greater detail of what amendments are proposed by the council and how many were proposed earlier, etc., etc. I can say that the Council of Architects, sorry, the Architects Act, under which the Council of Architecture is uh, created, it does not define the role of an architect at all. All that it says in section 2 is that architect means a person whose name is for the time being entered in the register. But it does not talk about what is the exact role of architects. Now, if you study what all an architect studies and what all civil engineers study, you will find that there are certain things that fall only in the domain of architecture. There are certain things which fall only in the domain of civil engineering. And there are certain things which can be done by both. Now, there is a necessity that some clarity is brought by amending the definition of architects, or at least adding what is it that can only be done by an architect. If that is done, then many of the present day problems between architects and engineers will go away. The second problem is that the representation of various stakeholders on the council itself, that needs to undergo some change. Right now what happens is that 5 members are elected from amongst the members of Indian Institute of Architects. Fine, this is supposed to be the representation of professionals, and this was all very good when the Architects Act was made, because almost every registered architect registered with the council was also a member of IIA. So this was a really good method of ensuring that the profession is represented. Now what has happened is that there are about 80,000 architects, and only 20,000 out of those are members of the Indian Institute of Architects, which means when these 5 people are elected by IIA, they represent only 25% of the practicing architects. Rest 75% have no representation. So there has to be some kind of an amendment which takes into account that there may be architects who are not members of IIA, and they also need to be given some sort of representation on the Council of Architecture. Now, let me take you to something that happened in 2005. India became a signatory to GATS. Now, what's GATS? GATS is General Agreement on Trade in Services, and this is something under the World Trade Organization. Now, what is this GATS? I mean, what does this GATS do? It allows for people all over the world to provide services, sell goods, marketized or privatized sectors which can operate internationally. As a part of GATS, countries are expected to enter into mutual recognition agreements for various professionals. For instance, if an Indian architect wants to go and practice in Singapore, then Singapore and India need to have a mutual recognition agreement, which says that if somebody is registered with Council of Architecture in India, we will allow that person, give him equivalence and allow him to work as if he is registered with the Singapore board, something like this. And a person with Singapore board will be allowed to practice in India. This is the sort of provisions that requires to be made through a MRA or mutual recognition agreement. Now, the problem is that in India, anybody who passes out of a college which is recognized by council and gets a degree which is created or which is given by a university created under the state act or a central act, he is directly registered. While as elsewhere all over the world, an architect has to first work as an apprentice after passing out for a period of at least 2 years, and after that he or she has to appear for a professional examination, and only on passing that the person is registered. Now, as a result of this, whenever the Council of Architecture tried to enter into any kind of mutual recognition agreement with any outside country, it cannot go through, because they say that you don't have the provision of internship for us and provision for a professional examination. Now, the council has tried, I know, quite often, but the government does not allow them to conduct a professional examination as yet. And therefore, when our architects, when they go outside India, they are not considered as equal to the architects practicing in those countries. Now, there is another very interesting point about our present system. The Council of Architecture has created the minimum standards for architectural education. They inspect various schools and they regulate intake, etc., etc. Now, all this is done to ensure that the process of creating an architect is regulated. But there is nothing which regulates the product itself. So when we say that if a school is recognized by the council, it automatically allows every student passing out of that school to become an architect. But if you look carefully, you will find that in every school there will be good students, there will be average students, and there can be very bad students who are not well versed in the services that have to be offered as architects, and you are letting them loose on society. So there is a need to not only regulate process of making of an architect, but also test every product. And therefore, this professional examination is very important. And then there's the last question about architecture already in practice. Now, you know that the world is changing, so many new things are coming in. And unless you keep abreast of what is happening, you would not be able to provide good architectural service. Now, is there anything done to ensure that these 80,000 architects who are already practicing and they are registered and therefore practicing, is there any upgradation done? Are there any continuing education programs which are made compulsory for architects? As of now, no. But if the council has to really fulfill its duty of ensuring that architectural services provided by those who are registered with them are of a certain quality, then there have to be these programs of continuing education for architects who are already registered. So these are some of the important changes that need to be done in our act. Another very interesting question is that the practice of architecture in India is only allowed for natural persons and not legal persons. Now, what is the difference between natural persons and legal person? Every natural person is also a legal person, but legal persons also include companies, partnerships, any kind of an organization of different people. That is also called as legal person. Now, here the council only registers natural person. It does not register a company. It does not register even a partnership. Now, there was a very important Gujarat High Court judgment which said that only architects can call themselves as architects. Partnerships between architects and non-architects cannot provide architectural services. Okay. And as a result of that, only partnerships which has all partners as architects can practice. Now, what has happened is that because of this, the multidisciplinary practice of architecture is prohibited today, which means if a company or a firm has architects and non-architects working together, it is not allowed. However, what has happened is that architectural projects have become so large and complex, they require a lot of manpower and skills. So only individuals or partnerships are too small to provide architectural services. The world over, what has happened is, including in England, our Architects Act is based on the British Act. They have come out with a provision for limited period licenses for corporations, companies, and multidisciplinary firms as well. Only provision that they have made is that they have said that when it comes to providing architectural service, it has to be provided only by the architects who are employed with that company or part of the firm. Non-architects who are part of these firms or companies cannot provide architectural service. But in India, that doesn't happen. So what happens is that Indian firms are at a disadvantage, because when large international projects are, come into the market, corporate global players also bid for these projects. And the Indians, because under our own act, we can't become that big because we can't become corporates. We are at a disadvantage. So something has to be done vis-a-vis allowing multidisciplinary practice and corporate practice in India. Now, what are the challenges for our profession in the future? I have touched a few of the challenges, but I will quickly go over many other challenges that one will have to face. The first thing that has happened is globalization has led to and rapid urbanization also has led to the whole industry of architecture practice or the construction industry has undergone a great change. Okay, to start with, there are new kinds of infrastructural facilities that are required. Also, the larger facilities of all kinds have to be built very quickly, and therefore new technologies and new materials have to be used. See, things like nanotechnology have brought in now very strong and light materials, and architects need to use them. Unfortunately, our educational system has not really responded to this. Most architects have not learned about the new technologies. So that is something that we have to do. We have to learn about how to use new technologies and how to use new materials. Okay. Second thing, as I already told you, that most building components are now being produced in an industry. So they have become industrial products. And in a foreseeable future, most of the building may get manufactured in an industry and only assembled on site. Okay. Or even the entire space may be built in a factory and simply brought and plugged in. Just to give you an example, like you have the road which is made by the public authority, and somebody who wants can go and buy a car and use the car and run it on the road. Similarly, it is quite possible that governments or semi-government agencies may create some kind of basic infrastructure and people will simply buy a house and plug it in. Now, when that happens, what will happen to you and me? Architects will have no role because most of the designing would be done in the industry and number of products would be simply manufactured. But what will also happen, that though our conventional role will vanish, we will there will be new opportunities which will open up. For instance, a component of a building will have to be designed, so become more like product designers than architects. Also, there will be the completely new sector of marketing these products where architects may be employed. Remember what Le Corbusier once said. He said, house is a machine to live in. And in 50, 60 years after he said this, it has become almost true. Buildings have become very intelligent and they function like machines. They can adapt to changing climatic situations. For instance, you already know that there are buildings where openings, their sizes change based on what is outside, what is the lighting condition outside. Things like this are already happening. But you will see that this will happen more and more. Tomorrow's building will be able to morph themselves in form, in size, in orientation based on what is required. And if this is to happen, then there will be a lot of high-end computing and technology that will be required. And architects will have to learn all these technologies to kind of dovetail them into their own architectural design work. So a different kind of skill sets will have to be acquired by architects. Then the next challenge before us is the change in lifestyle. You know, because of the change in lifestyle, earlier we used to make buildings which had to last very long. We would say the building lasts for 200 years. Now what happens is in 10, 15 years time, the building is redundant. I'll just give you an example. Earlier, the banks were designed where you had huge halls where people used to wait and the cashier would call you and you would go and withdraw money. Today you have the ATM. So that whole hall with people, a waiting area for people, the cashier's cage, the place to store money, all that is gone now. Now, what do you do with these redundant spaces? Or now you want to, order something. You don't go to a shop. You simply go to some of the websites and order online. So what is going to happen to the large shopping areas? So like that, many of the building typologies that we see today, they will become extinct over a period. Theaters, they will become extinct. Everybody wants to watch a movie on their laptop. Now, when that happens, what do you do with these spaces? So what will architects have to do now is design spaces which can accommodate and transform themselves to allow any kind of activity to happen, and that will require very special skills. Of course, it is very difficult to predict what changes will happen, but at least architects may have to now think of buildings that don't last for 200 years but can be recycled, remodeled, broken down into smaller pieces and rebuilt to allow different kind of use. Okay, and the most important thing is that architects will now have to understand, realize that they are no more the center of the world, that they are not the sun and the earth doesn't revolve around them, but just one person in a long list of people involved in the construction industry. You are no longer the team leader, you are one of the team, and we will have to de-learn our earlier ways of being very proud, aloof, and separate, and learn to work in a team.